Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. We answer your questions about media production every single day. And if you have questions, of course, you can use Makana if you're already in Makana. If you're not in Makana, you can ask the questions via this QR code, or you just go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. We look at that 24/7. Well, I don't know if we look at it 24/7, but we check it regularly, and we'll move your questions. If you ask them right in the middle of the show, we'll try to move them in during that show, or we'll move them into the next day. But any time of the day that you see this video, you can go to askofficehours.global, ask your questions, and we'll feed them in and answer them as fast as we can. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
Our first one comes from Douglas Carmichael this morning, and Douglas says, do you think that the changes forced on Apple by the EU Digital Markets Act will negatively affect the security of the iOS or iPadOS platforms as much as Apple claims? And he's got a link there to the story.
Nigel?
Probably not, because Apple's going to have to be very careful that even complying by these rules, as stupid as some of them may be, if it damages the security of their platform, they're the ones who are going to get hit. They're not going to go back after the bureaucrats who are doing this piece of work. I think the reality is you've got to use your time machine again and say 1 year, 3 years, 10 years, what does this mean? 1 year, there's going to be a lot of mess. Most consumers aren't going to see this. They're going to ignore it or just say yes and move on and not worry about it. Apple's going to have to protect its software code. I think 3 years, it's going to get messier. I think this battle is going to continue. But it's a lot of rich companies trying to get money off other rich companies. In 10 years' time, I suspect Apple will have innovated by this and will have moved way past it. We won't even remember this debate.
Yeah, this is definitely a fight of the aristocrats. Your land is too close to my sheep. We're not talking about this. There's nobody here fighting for the little person, the little developer, or the user. These are all big companies who want more money, and they want more money from a company that admittedly makes a lot of money as well. But this is really an aristocratic, conversation here, and the EU is taking it on because the little companies that they are trying to push forward are European, and the big companies are all American, and so this is really them they don't care about the American companies, and they don't really care about the users, either. So I think that, for the user, this becomes a lot more complicated for an Apple user to have to deal with this infrastructure. What will happen is that companies like Epic, like possibly Facebook and others, will try to build marketplaces outside of the Apple ecosystem, and they'll take apps so that they're only available. This is why it's not good for the user, that they're only available outside of the Apple ecosystem. So if you're in Europe and you want to use an app that your friends are using, you now have to, before, everybody had to build inside of an ecosystem that you had and that wasn't controlled by Apple. And now you're going to have to go out to other ones and have multiple stores and so on and so forth if you want to use those. I think a lot of users won't want to use them, and they probably won't. And they'll probably start to push back when it starts to get complicated. What's usually missing is someone to focus that energy, because consumers will be frustrated, but we'll all be frustrated without any focus. And that doesn't mean anything. That there's a lot of things in life that bother us, and until someone focuses that anger, it doesn't go anywhere. So we'll see if anybody actually does that inside of Europe. In general, the EU really stands in a place where it could look pretty foolish as this moves forward. Apple's going to do the best it can because it's trying to protect its brand. They're trying to make sure that they don't that it's not. They're seen as a very secure infrastructure, and it is going to make it less secure. 100%. Like having someone else build, even with all Apple safeguards, it's going to be less secure, and things will happen. And I guarantee you, Apple will promote the things that happen and tell you, "I told you so." And the advantage for Apple is that this is only being done in the EU, and they're only making it available in the EU. So what's going to happen is that when problems occur in the EU, there's going to be a whole lot of Apple looking at the United States and everyone else seeing, see what happens when you do that, it's going to be a relatively, I think it's actually good for Apple that a group of countries do this, because it's foolish, and it's not something that, as stakeholders, as Apple stakeholders, we who buy the hardware we're not the investors, but we put the most money into the system. This does not help us at all. As users, this is only for big companies to make more money. Go ahead, Chris.
Do you think it's inconceivable that Apple would just put their foot down and say, well, then we won't sell apps to people in the EU? There will be no... People are pretty smart. They'll figure out how to use a VPN or something like that. Right. Put the onus on them. But if they drew a hard line in the sand and said, then we opt out, we don't play, and then maybe pull a card out of the Ross Perot playbook and just buy a bunch of network television time and say, we're going to explain to you why we're doing this. It's bold. It's a big it's a big deal, but it's important to us, and this is why. And explain it in a way. Get the best producers in the world to make an informative infomercial on why Apple has chosen not to sell software in the EU.
I think that there is some break point where Apple would make that choice. The EU represents about 20% of their, or 20 to 30, between 20 and 30% of their income, depending on what you look at there. So it's a pretty large number. It's a number that Apple could afford to say, we're going to draw a line in the sand. Also, the chances of it really lowering their revenue by 20 to 30% is very low. People are pretty tied into their iPhones, and what they'd all do is go to the UK. And buy their, have a holiday in the UK, buy their iPhones.
Take a trip through the channel so they could update their OS.
or through the tunnel. They'd use VPNs, and all Apple has to do is build a better VPN built into the iPhone, and then people could, they've already started that, by the way. So the VPN stuff that Apple is building would make it so that you don't really live anywhere. And so that's something to take into account, that Apple may have been thinking about this for a little while. Go ahead,
we
Courtney.
all live in Cupertino.
Well, again, the VPN system that they have there, they could allow you to attach to the store from it, and then you could say, well, if you're in the EU, of course you have to do these things, but if you have a VPN, there's nothing we can do about it. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
I don't know if it's about cutting off the store. I think Apple should be worried about cutting off sales of their hardware. This is all about side loading. The EU is demanding that they allow side loading and not have the closed walled garden, where they take 30% of every app that is
not every app. They take 30% of the top apps. Top 2%. So 98% of the apps in the iPhone pay 15%.
Okay.
So
they're still taking a substantial big, but sure. If you side load, you may not have to pay. Side loading, they may not have to pay anything.
No, Apple, the current version of Apple's agreement of what the EU is looking at, does mean that you're paying every year. You'd be paying 50 cents a person that downloads yours. So they're not giving it to you for free.
And their excuse is that, of course, this would hamper security. But in reality, there have been bad actors that have gotten apps onto the iTunes store that have escaped until they're discovered and reported, and then they're removed. But
that's exceptionalism. Like exceptionalism is
is exceptionalism that exceptionalism that every app that you download from sideload is going to have malware in it. That's not every, true either.
Significantly more. Like significantly more. And Google's already proven that.
If you download from a reputable company that just doesn't want to give Apple 30% or 15%,
I know, but
it's certainly possible. And
what does that buy me as the user? Like, what does that really buy me?
It buys me access. Let me tell you, it buys me access to apps that I couldn't get before that do things that a lot of apps that are prevented from doing on Apple because it would affect their marketability. So that's why for example, let me give you an example. My YouTube app that plays all YouTube videos without commercials. It's a free download. It's not available on Android. It's not available on the Google Play Store. You have to sideload it. But it's free. It plays all YouTube's, plays YouTube without any commercials, eliminates even promotional stuff inside the app, self-promotion, long intros, things like that. It deletes all that stuff as well. But can I get it on the Play Store? Can I get it in the Apple iTunes Store? No.
And do you think that the most users care? I do.
I wouldn't watch YouTube without that app.
Fortnite was taken off the App Store, and do you know what do you know how many people protested? How many Apple users Did you see the protest? Did you see the marches? Did you see the email? No, they just went, "Oh, I'm going to go play another game." Like they don't care. Like the thing is that I know that you're as an Android user, you think that this is important. For Apple users, we don't care. Like, like we don't care about
well,
those
that's
apps.
true. I'll give you that. Apple users don't care.
Like, we just don't care. Because here's why. I've thought about
Because
this a
we're
lot.
Apple users.
No, Apple users, their phone is actually not more important than Android users. It's less important to them. What's important to them is that it's not problematic, that it's not complicated, that it's not like that it just works, and they just want it to work, and they just want it to be secure, and they don't want to have to think about it. And all the other things that people talk about with this, there is another platform called Android, which is 75% of the market. Mm-hmm. So we have to remember that Apple's not controlling
That's
this
what
market.
I'm saying is if you outlaw, if you don't agree to the EU, they'll just force them over into the Android market, and so they will suffer in phone sales.
I don't think that you're going to see Apple users go to the Android market. It's not a direction that most people go.
Well, if they're prevented from operating in the EU territory,
no.
They might be prevented from selling unless they offer.
Apple doesn't sell in many countries, and there's lots and lots of iPhone users because
there's gray market too, but it's a minuscule amount.
Not in Africa. It's like a huge amount. And when you're in the EU and you're only a little ways away.
You hear that, iPhone counterfeiters? Africa is where it is.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go ahead and jump to the next question.
Next question comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul says, how do you sync up Synology drives in different locations?
Good guy.
Yeah, I think the easy way is just to use Dropbox and Google, but depending on how much data it is, like I tried to throw a massive file up the other day and Dropbox said that's too big. Like I'd never seen that before. So I could see why you might want to do this, but it's something called Hyper Backup. It's a package in the Synology there's a little package center. You double click on that and then you attach your remote NAS. So once you're signed in, you can attach that remote NAS and that's how you would back it up. But the simple way is, I think the way that you did it last week when you asked this question, there was one about Dropbox and Google Drive. And I think that's the simplest way for small files. But if you have massive files, then yeah, site to site with the remote NAS device selected in the Hyper Backup.
Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York is up next. I have an Obey 70 to control my house lights. This has MIDI IO, so what hardware would the panel recommend to connect this to my production computer to map cues from the presentation software?
Good guy.
I'm not the expert on this, but because nobody else raised their hand, I'm going to jump on it. So the DMX King, so you probably want to go DMX, and hopefully Talalik or somebody will correct me in the chat, but QLab is the software that you would use. It's just super expensive. And when you say house, if you're talking about house as in home lights, there's so many other better options than trying to use something this massive that'll play nicely with your phone. And there's all kinds of automations, presence sensors, and things like that. But QLab or Luminaire is the iPad app that works with DMX King. And I would go DMX. I wouldn't go MIDI. So there's so much more control. You won't get that steppiness that you will with MIDI. But those are the things to look at. I don't want to send you down the wrong path, but QLab is a free download. It is super expensive, though, if you want the full-blown version. But there is a free version for you to try this out and see if it works for what you want to do by hitting those cues.
Super expensive is a relative term.
$1,299 for software to me is super expensive.
Oh, I bought a lot of software for more than that. so it just
recently.
Depends on
I mean, what software recently is over $1,000? I mean,
I bought Cinema 4D from Maxon. I don't remember what it was, but it's in the $2,000 range or something like that. I mean, for the full loaded version of it, if I don't want to pay the monthly fee for it. So yeah. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Eric Hertz in Hartford, Connecticut. Is it possible to have a profitable TV show without an ad-supported content distribution network?
Courtney?
Yeah, I think it is. There's product placement, which a lot of people kind of overlook. But that can play a large amount in covering the cost of production and distribution of a television show or a regular series. Remember, when television just started, there were sponsored shows, Texaco Theater and so on, and Chevrolet sponsored the Dinah Shore show, and they paid for all the production costs, and the network paid for distribution. So I think it is possible to do it these days with. Nowadays, you can have multiple product placement companies contributing to your dramatic series, whatever, and be successful. If it's a popular show, they will get results from that product placement. So I think it's possible without obvious, commercial ad support. It's just invisible ad support.
the main thing is you just have to figure out how many people are going to watch it and how much you're going to make per person. So that is so things that do work. It depends on what kind of, when you say TV show, what kind of TV show that looks like, but they have to figure out how to pay for the bandwidth. So, so you look at the total cost. It may, it's not a lot per person, but it is a lot if they're not paying for it, and there's a lot of them. So, a lot of times your kind of basic pencil math is that someone might cost you, let's say, 16 cents for a 1 hour show, to watch. Not a big deal. But if there's 200,000 of them, it is. It's real money. Or if it's 2 million, it turns into like a lot of money. You're talking about $300,000 just to deliver the video to them. And you might be able to make it a little less at scale. But it's probably somewhere in that range. If you're serving up HD or worse, 4K, you're going to start paying that much. Now, if you're charging them $1 each, or you're the problem is that like what kind of CPM do you get that buys you that? So 16 cents is 160 CPM, which is a lot. It is so that becomes complicated for you to make happen. And again, at scale, where some of these companies are having peering and a lot of other things, that might be a little bit less, but it's still going to be maybe 16 or 20 CPM. To make that actually happen. And so that's also why you see a lot of stuff get overcompressed. When you're wondering, why does this look so bad on Netflix, which I say often, it's because, you're paying a certain amount of money per show. And now if you think about that $8, the question is if you're paying $8 to Netflix or $10 to Netflix, how many shows fit into 16 cents each, or 10 cents each or whatever. So that's a lot of shows for you to watch that they still make money. So, so that's their calculation is that there's so many of them, but they have to keep that price down. So, so that's the real challenge that you have. Now, if you're doing a pay-per-view, easy to make money because every person's going to come in, they're going to cost you 16 cents. They're going to pay you $1 or $10 or $100 if it's a boxing thing. And that number becomes nothing. But without some kind of revenue connected to a per viewer cost, you've got some issues to kind of sort out. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Matthew LeCount in Oakland. When streaming fast movements, how do we keep the image from pixelating or blocking? And he notes he's running 12 kilobits per second for 1080p 30.
I'm guessing I'm hoping that you mean 12 megabits per second because at 12 kilobits per second, it would be very choppy. In fact, I'd be surprised if you got audio out of that. So, if it's 12 megabits per second, for 1080/30, that is plenty. You should not be seeing pixelating or blocking. So something else is going on because that's a lot of bandwidth for 1080/30. I would consider a high quality stream at about 8 megs a second, and 12 megs a second would be almost overkill. We might do 12 megs a second if we were doing HDR, but that would be about it. Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm seeing this a lot lately too, and even in Netflix and Mac's, paid streams downloading. I'm seeing a lot of macro blocking, mainly in dark areas. It's not necessarily fast movement or rapid cutting. You will see it if rapid cutting happens. You'll get above the bandwidth limit, and I have a 4K TV that is enabled for fairly fast streaming and a gigabit Ethernet network and 500 down, which should be plenty, 500 megabits. So I think it's just they're limiting because of the plethora of channels that they're sending out now on all these streaming services, like YouTube TV is where I'm seeing this problem. And I think YouTube TV is kind of allocating bandwidth dynamically. And a lot of times, even the pay channels kind of drop into macro blocking, especially in dark areas where you'll see it, where the noise will cause the macro blocks to really show up quite a bit. And by eliminating noise, you can prevent the pixelating and blocking. And eliminating fast cutting. But other than that, I think you'd look to your supplier and talk to if your channel provider, your streaming provider is getting very blocky, talk to them. They may be limiting the amount of bandwidth they're downloading to your device.
Good guy.
Yeah, for other folks, it may just have really low bandwidth as well. There's more efficient codecs. I'm sure this has got to be a a typo here saying 12 kilobits because you're not going to get nothing. I mean, you're not even a postage stamp size video. That back in the day, even the 384. For those of us that had 56K modems and streaming at 384 kilobits per second, it was a postage stamp. So what we do is we'll take H.265 and bounce it off of something like Castor or AWS, and that way, because natively YouTube won't take it. I'm just giving an example of a CDN that won't ingest that more efficient codec natively. So you got to bounce it off of something. And so Castor.io, I'll put a link in the chat, is one way of doing that really efficiently. The other way we'll do it is with hardware H.265 and encoders that are SRT, feed those up, and then just put longer latencies. So that way that we call it rainbow puke. You can get rid of some of that by expanding out the latency and just giving it more buffer to play with. So those are some efficient ways. The other last one that I haven't got to play with much yet is AV1. So vMix 27 will do AV1 off one of these $200 cards or anything with a 4000 series NVIDIA card. So that's an exciting thing to look at if you do indeed have really low, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 kilobits per second. But to do HD, you're going to need at least that, even on a high efficiency thing, or an AWS Elemental is the other thing to look at. The baby one, you can find those on eBay for like $500, and that'll be an API that talks to the encoder directly, and that way it'll throttle down and try to be as efficient as it can possibly be, and that's using the Zixi codec. So that's another option to take a look at if you do indeed have very, very, very tiny bandwidth.
I'm curious as to whether, when you say that you're having trouble, is whether it is are you streaming to a CDN and then supplying it to everyone, or is it your CDN? Is it something that's delivering the ladder that you are creating, or is it something that you're sending to something like YouTube or Facebook or other things? Because even if you're sending 12 megs a second, as a guy alluded to, you're not necessarily and Courtney, you're not necessarily delivering that to the user. It's going to be re-encoded. You can stream, I believe you can stream up to what I'll say is the most I've ever streamed to YouTube is 35 megs a second, and so it will accept 35 megs a second. So you just have to decide. And then there's multiple ways of streaming to YouTube, which includes HLS and which you can do a lot of other things with. So RTMP is limited, but enhanced RTMP, which is just rolling out, as well as I think YouTube is experimenting with SRT, and we also know that the HLS works for higher bandwidth as well. So there's a couple different ways of doing it if it's something like YouTube, but which is kind of, in my opinion, as far as an ad-based public CDN, so Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, so on. YouTube is definitely the high watermark as far as the quality goes of what you can just turn on and stream to. If you're doing a public CDN, that is, that's somebody else's cost. There's other ones obviously that you can do if you're going to pay for it. But I think that, but 12 megs a second should be enough for 1080p, but it is, again, what is it delivering? And that's what you want to look for. Next question.
Next one comes from Max Schiffman in Carlsbad, California. What does the panel recommend for downstage monitor stands? Looking for something better than a guitar stand.
And I am, I got myself turned around here. So the one that I have used in the past that I like a lot is this Chief. I don't have one right now, but I like these Chiefs. Okay, so this will hold a very large monitor, and here's one of the things that really makes a difference in downstream or the DSMs, these confidence monitors, or in Europe I think they call them comfort monitors, at least in the UK. These are the monitors that sit, for those of you watching, these are the monitors that sit down below the stage, and a lot of times you'll see these below the stage, and they hold sometimes up to 5 or 6 monitors, and what they're showing you is what you're saying next, your script. If you're wondering why people on stage are always looking down, it's because they're reading their script off of that downstream monitor. They are, or they're looking for their next slide, or they're looking. This is why most of us say, we should just make a video out of this if that's all you're going to do, because you look horrible looking down downstage like that. So these downstage monitors are very popular. If you're going to use them, I will say that probably 50% of the time we build them. Like, we build them from scratch, and they are designed to look a certain way, and because that way we close them off and they look really nice on the back end. And so we have them built on site typically. You have someone come in and they They literally assemble them because they have a certain look that they want for those. So they're part of the stage design. But if you're not doing that, again, these Chiefs work really well because they have wheels. They're very, very solid. The Chiefs are very, very solid. You can put a pretty big monitor on there, and you can move them around. You'd be surprised at how frustrating it is to get the downstage monitor to where you think you want it, and then have a speaker go, I wish it was 2 feet over, and you've got infrastructure there rather than just pushing it 2 feet over. So think about when you do downstage monitors, think about the wheels. They're useful. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas comes up next. How does Google Takeout work, and how do you restore it? Is it like a zip file, he wonders?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I tried to look into this, and I can't give you an answer because, as I found out, Google Takeout is your content is only available on an authorized G Suite for education accounts. So just a regular Gmail account or Google account is not eligible for Google Takeout, apparently. So you have to arrange this to log in. And I tried to log into Google Transfer. I gave it my Gmail account. I gave it my phone number. I gave it my name, and it goes no account registered. And this is signing in from from a Chrome window that is signed into my Google account. So I think it's only available to educational accounts. So I can't really give you an answer.
I go ahead, Chris.
I got to admit, it's not a great name. I thought Google was on a warpath to take out Uber Eats when I saw this.
I was just saying, I wonder if it comes with General Cho's chicken. So, like if you can add that to the menu, then I'm in. Mickey says that it will be delivered in an archive package. You cannot restore it back to Google. It's up to you to process the archive. Next question.
I want them to sell cables in those little takeout containers. Richard Armstrong, London.
Broccoli American style. Right.
There you go. What is the best method to superimpose or overlay a video of one person over the top of an existing video without green screen or chroma-key?
I think the question for you, Richard, is whether you're talking about doing it live or whether you're talking about doing it in post. So if you're talking about doing it live, there's no good way to do that. Like there's not any good way to take, people talk about difference keys and they talk about, and you get to see how good a difference key is when you look at someone putting their virtual background in and all the weird edges and everything else. So there's no good way to do that. In post, typically we would use rotoscoping. So rotoscoping has gotten much better. I mean, when I started, it was really, I rotoscoped some shots. Fortunately, they were just of droids, R2-D2 specifically. That was my first roto shot. And what you have to do is you basically start keyframing. So you put it where you have you put a frame where you want it to be, and then you look for basically creating keyframes, and then you start correcting those. And before you know, but you're drawing little lines around every object, and you're doing that every single. Look at when you think about like hair, trees, things flapping and with motion blur. All those things are things that have to be done with rotoscoping, and probably 80% of visual effects shots include some rotoscoping involved, or some rotoscoping is involved. So here's the funny thing. Even in fully animated films, I had a friend that worked on Shrek, and he was showing some of the rotoscoping he did, and I was like, "Why are you rotoscoping CG? And it's cheaper to fix it in post." It literally was cheaper to fix it in post than render it again, or try to figure out how to fix that. There was like a little bit of someone going through a log, and he was just like, "Here's how we painted it out," and I'm like, "You couldn't have just re-rendered it?" And he's like, "That would take a lot more people and more time and more render time, and it was just easier to paint it out." So. Rotoscoping and paint fixes are the way to do that. The tools, again, the auto tools that are built into Resolve, some of the auto tools, there's a lot of great rotoscoping. Mocha is a good plugin that you see in a lot of those types of things, of planar trackers. There's a lot that's gotten much better about this, but it's still arduous to remove someone well. It's easy to remove someone not well. So you can hack something through, and a lot of the auto tools will give you something that resembles a key, but if you really want to do it well, you're going to have to have someone spend some time on it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, and I 100% agree with everything Alex has said. If you're trying to get a moving person over a moving scene and you want it to be believable, that is all completely necessary. If in the one case you just have a talking head kind of person and you just want to overlay them. You can just use a simple 8-point garbage mat with a feathered edge or something like that. And if they're not moving around, you can kind of come up with a superimposition that looks okay. Will it ever be as good as the method Alex is saying? No, it won't be. But if it's a simple shot and you just want somebody talking about the content behind them, that's kind of the traditional way. That, or even just put a square mat on them and pop them into a corner. Those things are done every day as well.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the best, but I'll just give you an alternative just because I saw it the other day, and I'll bring it up because I was able to whip it together real quick. This is mimoLive, and as you import a source, so I just took my NDI input, and you could kind of see me in the middle screen there. That is called a background removal. So it's a little effects that you pop on, and Oliver uses it in meetings. He was the other day saying, why would I need a green screen? I'm like, because that looks very not. I could see artifacting in a big way. It's it's the generic version of a green screen. These Snapchat folks, these kids these days use it all the time, and of course it's a dead giveaway that it doesn't have clean edges compared to what we're used to. But mimoLive would be a cheap way with the background removal effect.
Next question.
Aaron Gencarelli, Flagstaff, Arizona, is up next. Is it possible to have 2 live streams on a single YouTube channel at the same time? If possible, how is it set up?
Yeah, so what you need to do is, it depends on what you're trying to do, but basically you can set up a new live stream. And let me see if I can I'm trying to figure out, make sure I'm not showing anything that can't be shown here. I'm just trying to pull up my YouTube here. Just give me 1 second here. And of course, there's all these things that I have to click on. Let's see if I can get to it here. So you're going to create a new live stream. And yeah, I think this is all fine. And so the key here is that you, so if you look at this here, this is what you have in your live stream account. This is always dangerous, so I apologize to everyone ahead of time on the back end if I actually screw this up. So anyway, so what you want to do though is you want to create a new stream key. So that new stream key is, we'll call it office hours example, if I can spell, can't look at example 1, don't ever use. Anyway, as our example there. So we'll say it's RTMP. You have a couple different options here. You can do RTMP, HLS, and then we'll go ahead and create that. Now what it's done is now if I go into, if I want to select those, I have a couple, I have a lot of Zoom ones here that are there. Let's see here. Let's see I thought it should, it's probably hidden under the so many that I just created here. There's a lot of gray matter ones that you can see here. There's office hours example 1. There we go. So we have this one here. So I do office hours example 1. And I'm going to select that one. Now that's what you want to do. And then you want to do another one. So you'll go in and say, you'll go back to here and say, create stream key here and say, a new stream key. Don't use it. Which is what I should have done first. And now I'll create that. And now I'll select, and now what I'll do is there's a new stream key here. I can create 2 different pages. I can just open up another page. So here's the A new stream key, and it's got its own keys and everything else, yada, yada, yada. But I can go into, I want to stream here, go live. And I can say I want to schedule a stream, and I could do something where I haven't even created one here, so we'll just create a new one. To kind of give you the sense of it here. This is a test stream. And we'll go to next. So make this unlisted. Always make your things unlisted. Never start up with a public stream. It's bad and wrong. All right, so now I'll go here, it loads it up, it'll have a default stream key, but now you'll see a new stream key here. But if I scroll down a little bit further from all my tests, and I'll have an example. Now, the reason that's important is that I have There's two different stream keys here, and they have two different stream. I'm not going to open this up, but there's two different stream keys that are there. If your encoder is streaming to those different ones, they're acting completely independently of each other. So that you can have two encoders or one encoder with enough power to stream to both of those keys separately, and you'll be able to, and those will be two separate streams. And if you want to send them two separate things, and you can just keep doing that. What you can't do is use the same key twice. So you can't use the same key on multiple ones. And here is one of the kickers, is if you're doing tests and you're bouncing around, you cannot reuse that key for a little while. So we don't have a real number, but it's 15 to 30 minutes. You can't use that key again. So you got to be kind of careful of that. Let's go to the next question.
Next question comes to us from Robert Sababity in Poland, and Robert says, when using mimoLive to stream, can you stream two outputs in two different formats, for example, a vertical format and a horizontal format? And if so, what advice can you give to formatting and cutting the show?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, one of the unique things about mimoLive is you can have two documents open at the same time. So here I have two documents open, and easily I can have one of the other documents. Let me pull this over here. One of the other documents can be a RTMP streaming to one place, and the other one can be streaming to another place. So you basically would, depending on how you want it to look, you're asking for some of the different looks. I would look at what some of the popular shows are doing as far as taking a 16 by 9. Like right now I'm in 16 by 9, but do we want to center cut me or do we want to blow me up? And you have the option with 16 by 9 or 9 by 16 to put other people. So for like this show, it'd be cool to have like Bill's nodding. You guys can't see Bill right now, but in a future world of office hours, I would love for us to stream in 9 by 16 and have Bill's nodding or whoever the TD chooses to have, kind of giving us a second head there. So yeah, you could absolutely do it with mimoLive. It's just two documents, two formats. And you might want to consider just doing NDI out of your primary 16 by 9 show and outputting that back in. And so you're basically doing a loop out, back in. So that way, as you're cutting one, all of those elements, that whole show is coming into the other show. And then you could have your other elements. Maybe it's some text or some kind of AI-generated captioning or something like that. But yeah, there's lots of good ideas. I'm looking forward to see what you do with it.
I think that one of the things we're trying to figure out, because I know that Chad has done some great work in vMix on this and has us thinking about it in mimoLive, is that we want to build it so that the 9 by 16 and the 16 by 9 are customized shows. They look like they belong in that format. And so Chad's got it working in vMix, and I'm trying to think about how to do it in Mimo. But it basically, so that now all the layouts, the questions, the lower thirds, everything all works vertically, and I think that that's a really interesting puzzle. It's one controller.
It'd be really cool to do it on Mac Stadium on a Mac and mimoLive, because the fees for AWS are going to get you. It's going to cost a lot, whereas one of the cloud machines on Mac Stadium is much, much cheaper to pull this off. So I'd consider looking at, because with mimoLive, if it's for this show, you just bring in a Mimo recorder, add the Zoom input. So grab everybody here, add input. We pulled 8 1080s in the mimoLive demo that Oliver did, the lab last week. So you can do 8. So we pulled in 8.
If you're in high bandwidth mode as a user, you can do 16. Like it's a limitation of Mimo. If you're a high bandwidth user, so office hours is high bandwidth. We could do up to 16 in Mimo. It's just a CPU limit at that point. Go ahead, Bill.
So decade ago, at least, I had one of my clients who was one of the major malls in my city hire us to do vertical videos for their signs outside the stores and things like that. And I remember going through just weeks of trying to figure out, okay, so if I'm shooting horizontally and I'm shooting video and I want content that works in the same thing, what are going to be my framing options as a videographer trying to do this? And we went through so many things. For a while, I had kind of an overlay that looked like the Red Cross symbol, so a big horizontal and a big vertical, and I would try to just mentally get there. And then for a while, we thought, well, what if we just shot higher res in square format and map that into both horizontal and vertical? I was unsatisfied with any of those solutions, to the point where I eventually made a rig where I set one phone horizontal and one phone vertically, and I tried mentally to frame as well as I could for both things. They're really unique formats for visual presentations. And I think I got to the point where I thought, well, if I really ever want to do this again, I'm going to try to get two people, one to shoot the event horizontally and one to shoot the event vertically, because there's just different requirements to do both of those well. And unfortunately, what I see too often nowadays is somebody who's shot horizontally, then they want to mat it into video. And when they do that, the heads get blown up so big that they really dominate the screen. And it can feel a little uncomfortable for me. So aesthetically, that's just my feeling about it. Aesthetically, these are two different aspect ratios. And to respect the audiences for each of them, I've come to the conclusion that I really need to pay attention, have a different brain on each of those two things. I may turn out to be wrong, and maybe somebody can figure it out, and maybe all this AI automation can find a way to mat a shot intended for one thing into another. But I'm struggling with it, and I'm just going to say that out loud.
I will say that the stuff that, because of the way that, and JJ mentions this in the chat, is that with the Fenwick framer, if all of us kind of fit properly into the Fenwick framer, it does work in both 9x16. I think we actually have to make our heads a little smaller to make it work in 9x16, to just a little, not much, but just a little bit smaller to make that actually work. But one of the things that's interesting is that we are looking at building the ability to build a multi-framed output that looks proper for both of those, where the graphics fit, because that's one of the things that we've had trouble with when we're doing shorts, is does the graphics fit? And I really want to stream to YouTube Shorts, which is now available in 9x16, but I need to figure this out, need to figure out the formatting. One thing that's really popular, so if you go to a creator event or you hang out with a lot of creators, they have these little things on the back of their phone, and I don't know if you can see these. These are like little, there you go, these little suction cups. Now, why would they put suction cups on the back of their phones? It's because they have two of them, and they go like this. And they snap them. They snap these together like they basically these suction cups will suction together like this, and one is horizontal and one is vertical. And you see this like the first creator event I went to, I was like, what are they doing? And then I suddenly realized all of them were doing the same thing, which is that they were shooting the same footage in 9x16 and 16:9 natively on their phones, and then being able to deliver them back to their editors or whatever to make that actually happen. And I found that to be just fascinating.
The two-phone solution.
I'd never seen it used. Obviously, I got it because I was like, I got to figure this out. But I'd never seen it used until, you can hear me just pop it apart there. But I never saw it used until I saw a bunch of creators. And then it turns out there's like 1,000 versions of this on Amazon. So obviously they weren't the first ones to do it. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I'm just curious, are they shooting one of the angles with the front camera and one with the rear camera?
They are, I think that they are actually.
Because if they're putting it on the back of both phones.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at how they're matting that. They may have another thing. I'll have to go back and look, because it was one of those things like they're shooting with one camera and shooting with the other one, and they're framing it up, and it's a very popular thing to do here. That's why I bought these, is so I could kind of figure that mechanics out. You're right, though. I'm confused. But I do believe that they're using one side of the camera for one and one for the other. And it's a really fascinating problem. Now, what I do is I shoot 4K, and then I just pan and scan inside of it for the 9x16. So if I'm going to do a 9x16 and I'm really going to do it, I'm going to shoot the whole thing in a 4K. And it's so easy now to shoot on an iPhone. Shooting 4K 60 is nothing, and so you just kind of make it happen. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. So one more thought about that. In framing for this and doing this, it became really important for me to understand that what we're doing here on the show, which is the show is composed of people in a relatively fixed position, becomes very important, because if you're run and gunning, or if you're doing anything else where you have two people in frame, two people is really easy in horizontal. Two people is really hard in vertical unless you ISO them and stack them one on top of another. So the traditional 2 shots, 3 shots, I want to release to a wide shot of the panel becomes a small nightmare.
As again, Chad's got it all working. So what happens is that when you're doing side by side, it goes over under, and then it splits you can split the thing. So it's just a different way of putting those frames together to make it actually work. And it is something that I'm thinking pretty hard about, because I think it's a really interesting puzzle. It is something that I think that, I have thoughts about how does this integrate with Isadora and how we do think. The idea is that you have a TD that is doing the same thing that they were doing before, and the software is figuring out how do I express that in both of those formats in real time. And Jeffrey is talking, Guy is talking about what's Spyglass? Oh, is that something else? Something else. Next question.
It's fascinating to me
Sorry,
because what is a vertical establishing shot? What does that look like? How do you think about that wide to give you a sense of the place and location in a vertical frame when I've never thought about an establishing shot as being anything vertical before?
Some things are, better done with horizontal, and some, the big thing is, especially for discussion, vertical actually works pretty well because you don't have to think about the stuff around people. So I know that this is one of the things, the cultures that works really well is the direct to screen, in a vertical format actually works pretty well. Yeah. Next question.
I agree. Next question comes to us from Nigel DeSalle here on the panel, Austin, Texas. It looks like Apple unveiled the new 13 and 15-inch MacBook Airs with the powerful M3 chip. Is the Pro just about I/O?
Did this just happen, Nigel?
Yeah, Alex Goldner tweeted about it. I saw his tweet. So here's the 15-inch MacBook. You'll note that the sort of high-end range, it's about the same price as the 14-inch Pro. What's interesting about this, I didn't notice that the Airs have MagSafe on them. I didn't notice they now have two if they didn't Thunderbolt ports before. They obviously do AVI one with all the other things you get from your beautiful new M3. So the big difference now, it appears to me, other than a faster processor, is the other two ports on the other side, the other Thunderbolt lane. So these lines are really overlapping, and it does look like, unless you're going to do a lot of 4K streams, the Air is becoming now it supports two external monitors as well, because I guess of the two USB-C ports, becoming a really powerful machine.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I don't think the Air supports two external monitors in the 13-inch. It does in the 15-inch, though, but not in the 13-inch. The difference, I went down the spec sheet and compared every comparison to the previous version of for example, the 13-inch M2 versus the 13-inch M3.
And just to correct you real quickly, the 13.6, so it's not 16, but the 13.6, the new one that just came out, does support, it says on the supports up to two external displays. So with the 13 with the lid closed.
With the lid closed.
13.6. This is brand new as of this morning.
Okay. I'm looking at the website now. But
it says, if you look at it here, it says supports two external displays.
And is that the 15-inch?
No, that's a 13.6.
Yeah, 13 does two. There's two USB-C ports.
Yeah. But with the lid closed, which means it's not supporting the one on the screen. So one external,
so if you want to
one external
come
image,
home and work on it.
Yeah, one external monitor if you're using the LCD. And the other, like Nigel said, it does do VP1 decoding, which the previous version didn't, and it's 0.3% faster. So it's a little bit faster, and they're reducing the price on the M2s now to $999. So it's $100 cheaper to get the M2 than the M3. So. Other than that, the specs and Wi-Fi 6.1 as opposed to 6.0, I think. So they've increased the Wi-Fi, or 6.1e, I think, the latest version of Wi-Fi. So they've improved that as well. But I looked down almost all the rest of comparing the M2 to the M3 of the same size screen is pretty much the same, except for this little speed improvement, the VP1 decoding, and the Wi-Fi bump.
Good, Bill.
For me, the thing is it's still fanless. If it's still fanless, the fact that they are increasing the density and performance of the chips and not increasing thermal load to the point where they require a fan in there or some kind of air moving is pretty transformative. That means we should get more and more smaller and thinner and easier to deal with machines. Plus, for those of us who happen to be doing voiceover stuff, the fact that you can have a computer that powerful in your voice booth with no fans and open mics will be fabulous. So looking forward to checking this out.
Yeah, as a small computer that you can kind of move around, I think that it's a relatively good, strong one. If you're doing production, I would still strongly look at the Mac Pro. There's definitely a lot more power available in the Mac Pros and MacBook Pros than these. I mean, so these are for people who do a little bit of design and a lot of other things, and it's great for that because you don't need all that power for that. But I will say that it is good that they're putting the USB. There's only two, I guess. There's still only two Thunderbolt. I thought for some reason I was looking at it, I was like, oh, there's more USB ports, but there's not.
Well, that's why I said the 15-inch has one more than the 13-inch.
Yeah,
it's the same number of Thunderbolt.
Yeah, the thing that just kills you is the number of connections. There's two Thunderbolt connections there, two Thunderbolt USB 4 connections. And I got to tell you, my wife has one, and it's just annihilating. To only have two data ports, because here's why: if you're watching this show and you're doing what we do, you want your audio to come in directly to the computer, and you want your video to go directly into the computer. You do not want to put those through a hub. And when you have something with only two, that limits you a lot. So really what you end up with is wanting to have, if you're doing what we do and you're watching this show, you probably don't want an Air. Like I'm just kind of laying it out there. Like you need 4 USB/Thunderbolt ports. You should not run these through. I mean, we see so many problems with people running them through hubs. You should not run these through hubs. Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I just want to be that other guy that adds another perspective. So I use the heck out of my iPad Pro, and so if you're looking at these, you really got to ask yourself, like, what are you doing most of the time? And then, so I have a MacBook Pro. It's an older one, and so I'm in this market right now, looking at what to get next. And after playing with all this stuff in the cloud, what I'm doing is I'm taking control over other machines. So think about that as well. As if you need an everyday carry, something you're going to carry, if you're taking a bus, you're traveling, what are you going to use on that airplane, little small surface? Is it a MacBook Air? Do you need all that I/O? Because taking control of other computers, I mean, not paying for all that extra, like it'll be about $7,000, $8,000 to get the computer that I want on a MacBook Pro, but I take control of these other computers that it blows my mind that you could rent them for so cheap. So I'm using PCs on AWS. I'm using Mac Stadium. So just something to think about. Is an iPad Pro a better use case because you can put cellular inside of that thing and it's touchscreen and you got the nice little flip out keyboard and pencil and things like that. So just another perspective. I'm excited about these computers, and I might this might be my next one is an iPad Air, which I would have never thought that I would buy. I never thought I'd get it. I'm like, that's too wimpy for me. I need all these ports, but you can just throw us out the 12 South hub in there and rock and roll. You got some ports.
Yeah, I think that if Zoom worked exactly the same, I'd be more tempted if Zoom worked exactly the same way on the iPad as it does on the desktop. I'd probably, the amount of control that I want to have when I do that is still limited on the iPad. I think I'd be more tempted to do that. And if I could run a full version of Photoshop, I think that's still, those are the kind of things that I'm still kind of wedded to, of like, I need a laptop, even an older one. I use an older 2020, Intel laptop. It's 14-inch or whatever. And I don't, and I don't have any, it's still running fast enough for me to use it because I use it like once a week. I have to turn it on in the morning when I know I'm going to use it so that it can do all its updates of all the mail and everything else because it's just never opened. And so I use my iPads are here and here, and I use them all day as controllers, mostly for other things that I'm doing. But I also can just I grab one, I just unplug it and grab it and walk off and do whatever I'm going to do with it. I love my iPads, and I use them, definitely more than my laptop. But I will say that when I travel, I still put a laptop in my backpack, and it's still not, I don't feel like the tools that I use are quite all available yet on the iPad. And some of it has to do with some of the stuff that Courtney was pointing out with the problem with the sandbox is that there's just apps that are available on the Mac that I can't get on an iPad. And so, I'm not able to do that. Yeah, go to Courtney.
I found one other addition to the M3 is it has hardware accelerated ray tracing. So if you're going to be doing any type of gaming that involves ray tracing, it might be a little bit better at doing that as compared to the M2. But the thing is that the
I don't know what
entry level
Apple game on an Air that I would use that I'd be like, oh boy, it has ray tracing.
Yeah, no, that's what I say. There's so little gaming, and that's nobody's going to really notice that. The other thing is that bugs me is they're still only making the base machine that they advertise for $1,100 is 8 gigabytes of RAM, and you cannot upgrade it. And that these days, that's just not enough RAM. You really need 16 gigs or 24 gigs. So you should buy it with the higher that base price is not going to be usable unless you're just checking email and doing routine stuff.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Which, of course, is what you probably want to use your Air for, which is
Right.
routine stuff. So that's the perfect about for most people. I have to tell you, the thing I'm much more interested in is the new iPad Pro. So I'm hoping in the stream of products that are coming out potentially this week or next week, I do have my eye on the new Pro. And so I had the first M1 iPad Pro, and so I'm excited to jump to the M3 iPad Pro. So that, I think, is my next purchase.
Come a long way when Apple releases a whole new update to their products without, I didn't even see a press release. It didn't even show up, so it's very interesting. Next question.
Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana, comes up next. What old software or systems might we still use in media production that could be a threat to a production company's future or bottom line? And he's got a link there to a thing about clunky old software.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Being the purveyor of a lot of clunky old software, I've got to say that this happens a lot in corporations. Windows has been able to hang on to a lot of their market share by making their operating system backward compatible for a decade or more. I have software that I wrote for all my streaming and playback software that I wrote for doing video playback. I wrote in 2001, so 20 years ago. Still runs on Windows 11, the latest version. However, you have to jump through a few hoops, and the ability to do that has kept companies in market dominance by being able to accommodate old software that was custom written for corporations. And a lot of corporations are hesitant to change if they don't have to. And it can cost them a lot of money if there's just a change in the operating system that cuts off the ability of that old software to run. It can cost them a fortune. So you got to be careful about that. If there's an upgrade that they may not be able to take advantage of new AI software, for example, or some of the neural network cores that are in the new processors, that'll be new software development, but their old software won't be able to take advantage of that. So it may be an impediment to upgrading their hardware.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, every once in a while I find it just truly amusing to go through my entire thing, do like Grand Perspective or one of those things that shows you everything that's still living on your hard drive and being able to sort it by last opened. There have just been so many programs over the years. You're going, wow, I haven't even touched that in 7 years. I think it may be time to get rid of it. I've gone through so many programs and so many iterations of things and seen so many get deprecated and fall by the wayside that I've come to anything over a couple of 2 or 3 years that have been, that are not key things. We're all exploratory. We like to fiddle around, but boy, you leave things on the machine, then you're going to eventually come to that point. And I remember it predominantly back when OS X made the big jump to have to get rid of all the original software that was not written for that platform. I probably had 70 pieces of software that had just, they're gone now. They're not going to run anymore.
Yeah, I think that this obviously happens a lot more on the PC side because Apple is much less forgiving as far as operating systems. They just keep moving forward and dropping things off the back end pretty quickly. But I think that these are especially in infrastructure, in large energy infrastructure, and so on and so forth. People are worried about this a lot. And the article, by the way, if you're looking for it, is this article in the Wall Street Journal. It's invisible $1.52 trillion problem. And, you're going to continue to see, a variety of, we've seen a lot of issues, people holding organizations hostage, over that. And so I think that that's going to continue to be a challenge for organizations for quite some time. I think that it's going to be something to, I don't really know how to solve that problem well. It's an enormous amount of work. Next question.
You got something still running in COBOL. Probably time to get rid of it.
Yeah, next question.
I don't think we have one on the list here.
There is. Next question. like that's out of order. There we go.
Oh, there we go. Andy Kokendorfer, Viera, Florida. Thoughts on the Beautiful.ai slide generation service? And he's got a link to it.
So this is called Beautiful.ai, and this is here you have it here, and it uses AI to build your slides for you. I don't know how I would use it integrated with everything else that I do. So that's my only, but it'll build, you put in a quote and it'll throw that up for you and find it for you. I think as far as brainstorming, that could work. I use Midjourney a lot for building specific images, but yeah, it's interesting. Coming up next, more questions. So if you've got questions, you can go ahead and throw them in. Go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and we'll do our best we can to get to them. Tomorrow we talk about image selection, how we approach that, some old school ways to do something that we need to do every single day. And we're back. So if you've got questions, again, second hour of questions, if you want to throw them into Makana, of course, you can throw them in. Make sure to vote on them there. But you can also ask questions with askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. Let's go ahead and keep the questions rolling.
Evan Troxel in Talent, Oregon is up next. I have an iMac and a PC coming into an ATEM Mini through an HDMI matrix. The PC shows fine. The iMac shows for 3 seconds and then goes black. Does it matter which port I plug it into? Same behavior. It doesn't matter which port I plug it into. Same behavior. The Mac shows fine when directly connected. Ideas?
Go ahead, Courtney.
It may be an EDID problem coming in from that HDMI matrix, so that when you're switching to the Mac, it doesn't, it's on the previous EDID and it triggers, the matrix may trigger an EDID refresh, which then it sees the Mac and they don't agree on the resolution or frame rate, and then it shuts off. So maybe that's what the problem is. Try running it outside of an HDMI matrix switch and see if it still does that. Or did you say that?
I will say that I can get this to work on a PC. I cannot get it to work on a Mac, and I have done many things to try to figure this out. The challenge is, and I can't quite get to the bottom of why the ATEM doesn't want to see it, because if you run it through, if I plug the computer in, and but there's just no way I can get to the ATEM. I think that if I use a third-party splitter or EDID spoof and I plug it in, I might be able to get it to work, and I just haven't gotten around to doing that. There's a lot of wires here, and I just haven't done it yet. But I've thought that it was all going to work, and I couldn't remember why I had this crazy wiring diagram that I have for this until I tried to do it again and reset it. And no matter what I do to get through the matrix to the ATEM, I cannot get it to show up. So what I do is I use one of my USB-Cs on my Mac Minis and the HDMI, and I mirror them. And so the mirror of that goes into the matrix, and then but it still runs natively. So the HDMI runs into my ATEM Mini, and then the mirror of with one other monitor goes into the matrix. That way I can still get that monitor. I can get that to show up somewhere else, but I'm going directly into the ATEM. And I have to say that I have not been successful at this, and I've had it for years. And I will admit, it's not like I've spent a week trying to figure it out. I'll spend a couple hours swearing at it and trying to figure out why it won't do that, because I'm doing like copy EDID, and what I try to do is I try to say, in my Blackbird, I would plug a computer into it and then go to a monitor. And I think it has something to do with that handoff. It's like and so what happens is if you try to make it think it's a monitor and you plug it into the Extreme, for whatever reason, the Extreme won't see it. But if you plug it straight into the Extreme through the matrix, it just goes into this cycle where it won't deliver what it needs. Like, it feels like the ATEM's going, "What do you want?" and the Mac is going, "What do you want?" And the ATEM goes, "No, what do you want?" And they just keep on going back and forth.
Hey, I'm computing here.
Yeah, exactly. We're not getting to an answer here. So I think that's the challenge. So I have not been able to successful. So my workaround has been to have my computer's mirror, and so I use up one of my USB-Cs to go into the matrix, and then have the HDMI going into my Mini, and that works. One thing that is important is always get your monitor from the HDMI. If you don't use that HDMI for a monitor, I can tell you from experience that it's difficult to use the computer. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up again. The Gaming Center event venue Space in Stockholm, which was started at the end of 2021 and co-owned by ABBA star Björn Ulvaeus, will be closing due to, quote, changes in the economy. Is there still a market for a well-equipped hybrid event venue?
Well, I think that what you want to look at is there still a market for large-scale gaming, and in a venue? I think that's more of they built this around. I mean, they might have had other ideas, but they built this really around the idea that they'd be able to do large gaming. And I think that what many have found in the gaming world is that it's not really an arena experience. And so people will come, and you can get them to come every once in a while. And so people would see these huge arenas full of people, but you can't do that regularly. They won't keep coming. It's not like football, and so of whatever, whether it's European or American or whatever, it is not been, gaming has turned out not to be a great spectator sport at that level, or sustainable. It's good when you do it every once in a while, not good when you do it regularly. So when people came back to it and said, we can build a business around this, it turned out they couldn't. I think that you are going to see more and more. I mean, there's always this zigzag where something lurches forward and then it kind of falls backwards and then goes forward again. It's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You rarely just keep on seeing 2 steps forward. And so as a result, what we're seeing right now is there's a lot of COVID pushed everybody really far forward. And then, people responded and wanted to go back to what they were comfortable with. But what we're seeing is kind of a slow draw of it continuing to become more and more hybrid and more online events. But they're not at the level of COVID. So we feel like, it really dropped down. But also everyone thought that people were going to go back to work. I was just reading an article and they said San Francisco is half of the workers are back to work in San Francisco, and they've given up that it'll ever get any better. There was this thing where it was all coming back, but about a year ago it kind of leveled off, and now it feels like it's settled. And so now they're trying to figure out what to do with all those empty buildings. But that's going to keep on drawing down because there's too many opportunities to work from places that aren't expensive now. And I think that you're going to keep seeing people, and I think that. But that draws towards hybrid events because people are less likely to be somewhere where they want to go to an event. And so that's going to keep on, that weight is going to keep on leaning into that. And a lot of it has to do with a lot of the technology is a lot better and it keeps getting better. So Zoom, for instance, launched forward. And now there's, we're all on 1080p streams and we've got Zoom ISO where we can pull a bunch of feeds out. And a lot of that's changed a lot of things as far as how we do events. And it's just the beginning. So you'll see over the next 3 to 5 years, I think you're going to see the technology get a lot better. And as a result, more and more people, because for the most part, there are definitely reasons to go to physical events. When we go to NAB, it's really good to touch all the things and grab all the things. But we have to remember that 99.999% of the world can't do that. They can't go. And that's a huge latent market that's waiting to be served. Next question.
Next one comes from Sean Johnson in New York City, or in just New York. I didn't say city. Has anyone had any experience with the Insta360 Link or similar cameras when 2 people are sitting in front of it? Can it frame up on just the person speaking if one is silent? The client wants 2 people in the shot for legal reasons, but is okay if it zooms in.
So how I would handle that is actually not to try to have it do it automatically. I turn off all the auto settings on that and have it and do it on your own. And what you can do with an Insta360 Link is you can have it set up where you have pre-shots. So you have a 2-shot, and then you have a 1-shot, and then you have a 2-shot. And you can set those up as presets for what it's going to look like. And then you just click on the little buttons and it will zoom in on that one person and zoom back and zoom in on the other person and zoom back. But you don't want to try to do any of that. Just turn all the automatic stuff off. In fact, I turned off. The first thing I do when I install Insta360 is turn off all the automatic things, like with the weird hand and the thing. I just turn all that off and then immediately start dialing in the positions that I want that camera to take. And I find that because the problem with a lot of the framing of people is the amount of headroom that almost every auto framer does is way too much. So it's almost always too much. And so that as a result, I almost always take out the auto tools. But if you do that and then you build your presets, you can it does a pretty good job. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I don't think the InstaLink does this yet, but the OBSBot, which is the other low-cost little PTZ camera, I recently attached it to the Stream Deck. So I can have presets on the Stream Deck. So you don't have to go fishing through with your mouse and go find that thing. Neither of them even remotely do a good job at reframing. I mean, it's really bad. They're both really bad. One is a lot slower than the other. I think the OBSBot is a lot slower than the Instalink. But, I mean, I'm not expecting it to be, broadcast worthy, but it's like they're trying to make it look bad. It's so bad.
I believe that with the Insta360, you can apply keystrokes to it. So you can have those setups. You can have the different framing that you have in the Insta360 and then apply keystrokes. And then you can use that to get it on your Stream Deck. So it's not like a companion.
Well, my day is ruined because now I have to go figure out how to do that. Thanks, Alex.
It will only take a minute. Next question.
Next one comes from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. And Roscoe says, is there a downside to putting a 20-pound camera rig on a 50-pound capability tripod head, or is it better to go with a 30-pound head for a 20-pound kit?
Go, Bill.
So I have done this in the past with actually good results, a really good tripod head. And most of the ones that are set up to do 50 pounds, the big O'Connors and Millers and things like that, you can put almost no load on them and they'll still be very smooth and very accurate. This is not always true. And let's face it, in tripod manufacturing, the trends have been smaller, lighter cameras forever. So you can get most of the performance of the big O'Connors and Millers of the past, which were fabulously designed and very expensive pieces of kit. You can get most of that spending a lot less in something a lot easier to travel with. So my opinion is, can you do it? Yes. Should you do it? Probably no, because unless you have those legacy tripods around, I would never get one today. The industry has just really made gigantic leaps, and you can get much more tripod that's appropriate for today's camera sizes for much less money than using those old ones. But if you got to do it, I'm going to think it's going to work pretty well.
Go ahead, Courtney.
The main disadvantages are carrying it around. It's a lot heavier and a lot bulkier. But most of the tripods that are heads that are rated for a 50-pound camera have removable or have different settings for the amount of spring counterbalance that they're going to use in order to compensate for your raised center of gravity or the heavier camera. And most of them can actually remove all springs from the tilt counterbalancing. So I just look at that and see if they have the ability. Some of them have a rotating adjustment on the side with numbers from 1 to 10 that adjust the strength of the spring that's inside there that's used to keep it from to compensate for the heavier weight camera on the top. And it's all about your center of gravity. The higher the weight is on the camera, the more you're going to need a heavier head or with more spring counterbalancing to keep it easy from getting too front heavy or then getting too back heavy, depending upon where you're tilting up a little bit more than just a few degrees or down more than just a few degrees. And if you're going to have a prompter mounted on it, it'd be better to have the 50-pound camera head than the 20-pound camera head, because counterbalancing with a prompter on it becomes quite problematic without those.
And at any size head, you want to make sure to balance that head. So we were talking about this the other day. You want to make sure that you loosen up your head completely to as fluid as it will go. And then you move your system back, once it's completely built, move it back and forth until you can let go and it'll just stay where it's at. When you don't do that, you're putting a lot of pressure on that head. And so you want to make sure that you always balance your head before and then you can tighten it up to what you want. The bigger heads, again, the 50 pounds generally, not always, but generally are higher quality heads within reason. I mean, I'm not going to put a webcam on a 50 head, but for the most part, the Sackler 2575s, the 2060s from O'Connor, I use those kinds of heads all the time. I rent them. I don't buy them. The biggest downside of really big, high quality heads is they're $15,000 each, and so I will buy. I'll buy those heads, but the big thing is it really creates a huge difference in your pan and tilt. It just feels so much better on a really big, heavy head, as long as it's a high quality head. Again, these Sacklers and O'Connors, the real trick, you'll always see, I've done a lot of this, will grab onto that handle at NAB or whatever, and they'll just push and see what is the play in the first quarter inch, the first, the first 5 to 10 degrees. And if there's any play in it before it starts to lock in and slow down, that becomes really problematic when you're trying to pan. And so those are the kind of things that you're going to see in a high quality one is not going to have any difference. And the lower quality ones, the ones sub $1,000 that are going to handle a lot of weight, tend to have a little bit of play in that first 5 or 10 degrees, and that's problematic. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida is up next. I have an executive that uses a MacBook Air for mobility. Since there are not many ports, what do you recommend for USB mic and webcam? Portable hubs?
Nigel?
Executives are such simple people. I would keep it very simple if I could. If you really want an external, then obviously the Instalink 360 is a great device. It has a mic in it. It comes with a nice stand. You can put it at the right height. But I'm going to.
Mine didn't come with a stand. That one came with a stand.
Yes, it is. So you got the special edition, the special birthday edition stand one, which is a very nice stand. I'm going to actually propose a slightly different solution to you, which sort of would not make it into office hours, but is pretty good for conference calls. So I have for my my iPhone one of these little magnetic things that goes into a little thing that I got printed for me that sits on the back of my MacBook, and my phone then just attaches to it, and I use continuity camera that way. And actually, I find that a really good picture. I find it good sound. It works really well. You can power it without having from a USB hub, without having to use up one of the ports of your Mac. And I'll tell you the other secret about that. Occasionally I have to do meetings and conference calls and stuff from very strangely, oddly shaped rooms. And you can put your phone on a shelf somewhere on the other side of the room and actually get quite a good number of people in it. So continuity cam, using that sort of solution actually can be quite good for an exec on the road, and they don't need to carry anything other than their phone and a little thing to keep it powered.
Can you tell us who makes that little?
I actually got it from Etsy. So it's a piece of plastic. If you search for it, MagSafe, it's called a Pro M1. It was like $5 or something. And the MagSafe charger just connects into it, and it works really well on the road. And I found that, again, you wouldn't get into office hours with it. But if you're an exec on the road and you don't want to carry an extra thing, and as I said, I often put my phone on a shelf just for an hour and do a conference call so I can get a group of people into it.
I am surprised at. I would say that it is the iPhone now as a webcam is competitive. Like I would say, if you're not going to get an Insta360 link and you already have an iPhone, I would just use that as your webcam. Like it's not, I wouldn't necessarily go. I think everything below the Insta360 and OBSBot, I would replace with an iPhone if I had one. Nikki says OWC 11 or 14 port Thunderbolt dock paired with an Insta360 link and an MB7. And I would say that you're looking for these larger hubs, these OWC hubs, and the OWC is where we'd probably go with those, where you're going to need, it has its own power. It feels like a piece of equipment, like it's not like a little hub that comes off that's bus powered off the, those are the ones that basically get overloaded with data, and you end up losing bits. The audio will break up, the video will break up. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I use OWC hubs too. With the MacBook Air in the voice booth, that's been interesting to me, and I think portable hubs have gotten better as long as you stick with a good one. And it's just one of those things that you got more options than you ever had before. And I never use USB webcams at this point, other than maybe if I'm out and have to just have the minimal kit. Things have just gotten better.
I would say that if I was an executive and I had budget authority, I'd be using a Mac Pro. And, and it's specifically because I have those extra ports. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I actually was just going to add that thought that the words in this question that struck me were executive and mobility. So you want to limit the amount of extra things you can take with you. You want to limit the amount of things that the exec has to plug in that makes work that they're going to do wrong, that you're going to get a phone call about. So those 4 ports on a Pro may be the best answer to that problem.
We're talking about a delta of $500 on someone who's probably getting paid $2,000 a day minimum. So it's not it's just the math doesn't add up there. And you can get a very small MacBook Pro that is marginally larger than an Air, and it's those ports, those extra ports, make a huge difference. Next question.
Mark Giuliani, Washington, D.C. When using an iPhone for filming an event that is over an hour, can you connect an external drive to the USB-C port and record to it?
Yes. So you can definitely record. You can, and interestingly enough, recording to this, again, what we've been talking about when we say don't plug a hub in is we're mostly talking about, real-time video and audio going into it. But as far as recording to drive, these are things that you could put, and we have people building kits all the time now with these hubs where they have power, they have an HDMI out, they have a drive connected all to the iPhone 15, and so they've got a Teradek that's sending out video, and all those things are all happening at the same time from their armature. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I just use an NVMe drive in a Caddy that had a USB-C connector to it, and you get up to 4 terabytes in that, and they pull a lot less power than a spinning 2.5-inch drive that you might be able to plug into it.
Yeah. Right. Next question.
Jack Ruppel, Breckenridge, Colorado. Have the panel worked or played with Feather 3D Sketchbook lately?
I haven't jumped on it lately. It's one of those things that I'm really excited about. And then I play with it a lot, and it's kind of like, and then I play with it for a while, and then I go, I should use this for something, but I don't know exactly what I would use it for other than just having fun. So Feather 3D, by the way, is a product that is kind of amazing. It lets you sketch in 3D, and so you can really you can build multiple planes to do the sketching. And it's one of those things, though, I do think to get really comfortable with it, you have to spend a lot of time in it, and more than I've spent. When I'm trying to think about, I haven't gotten to a point where I can think about something and go, oh, I can just sketch this. This is where I found the limit. When I watch someone who knows what they're doing using Sketch, using Feather 3D, I am always amazed. And it's one of those things that I still tend to move for me. And again, this depends on what your skill set is. I have a skill set in SketchUp and Cinema 4D and other things like that. So when I go, oh, I need to hack something out, I can try to draw it, but I'm like, well, I can be really precise if I just go into SketchUp, or if I just jumped into Cinema, I can just build a 3D model of it. But that's not, if you didn't have that skill set, I think being able to draw something in 3D, and especially as a designer, I think it's pretty useful. So keep on taking a look at it. I'll be really interested to see when they build something for the Vision Pro. I'm expecting to see, with no information from them, Feather working in the Vision Pro by SIGGRAPH. I just think that what they're doing so wants to be in the headset. And there's been Meta had tools for this that I've played with in the past. It's interesting. So stay tuned for more of that. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. Thoughts on the new Logitech Casa pop-up desk? And he's got a link to it.
Nigel.
Here it is. It's a little pop-up desk that looks like a sort of moleskin notebook when you fold it away. What's interesting about it is you can fit a small keyboard and trackpad inside the container. So you can actually make that a whole portable setup. And I was starting to get excited by that and thinking, well, this might be a great way. And then I thought, wait a minute, with that machine, why don't I just take an iPad Pro with me? And then with the Magic Keyboard, I get practically the same thing.
You go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's quite a misnomer. It's not a desk. It's a laptop holder, really. And the fact that it carries I don't know if that keyboard and touchpad come with it. It seems to be colored the same way. I'm not sure if it does or not, or if you can put your own.
I think the keyboard and the trackpad come with it.
Yeah. It must. For $179, other than that, it's just a piece of plastic that props up your laptop. I think I've bought some of these new Logitech Bluetooth keyboard and large touchpad combos that are pretty easy to carry. They're smaller than this thing would be folded down. It doesn't prop up your keyboard so that the only thing you're really getting out of this is the fact that since the keyboard's probably the same size as the one on your laptop and the touchpad is the same or smaller as the one on your laptop, the only thing you're getting is raising the camera up for doing Zoom calls. So there's probably other ways to do that more cheaply than $170.
Bill?
Yeah, I use something similar to this and have for a long time. Mine's from Marine Designs. It is a slightly upgraded model that's adjustable from this. But the reason that I've stuck with this for a long time and try to travel with it or something similar is that sitting at my desk, the 4 to 5 inches, actually this has got a little slider on it that can raise or lower the laptop screen even farther, is that ergonomically having a laptop on a desk flat in front of me means that I was always hunched over. As soon as I found this thing, I realized I can sit up straighter. And since I have to do hours and hours sometimes for the audiobook narration stuff at my computer, having a better ergonomic fit to your screen from your laptop can be a very big plus. And I highly recommend it. If you're going to sit in one place and use a laptop, try not to use it on the desk unless your whole rig is so set up that your ergonomics are right and whatever's supporting your elbows and your hands on the keyboard all work correctly, because you're going to spend hours and hours doing this. My 2 cents.
Yeah, the one that I use a lot is these Brokun. These, I don't know, I got them on YouTube. This is a black one, which I just got, and I have so many of these, and so they fold open, and they'll let me position this, and it's really nice because like when you're doing a webcam, I can really get these into the position that I want to have them in, and lean it up. I've got 2 of them. They're actually what's holding on to my iPads on either side of my interface right now, here and here, and so I had to buy more of them. So I had one for my travel kit and so on and so forth. But these fold up into almost nothing. And so I take these a lot so that I can get to the point that Andy Kokendorfer is making in our chat, is that it gets my webcam into the position, or it gets my camera and my screen into the position that I want it to be. I can definitely see the value in having it all boxed up and have it all there. But I don't know if I would. I kind of am addicted to the keyboards that I have. Next question.
Next question comes from Jack Ruppel, Breckenridge, Colorado. What hardware have you moved or removed from your workflow lately?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, you can't see it because I can't really show it to you because it's in Las Vegas. It's a Mac Mini M2 that's sitting in a data center at Mac Stadium. That thing, I've just been beating on it over the weekend. I was doing Wirecast 4K SRT inputs. So it's just a different mindset to have all you can eat, where a computer is on 24/7 versus an AWS. You're renting it by the minute essentially, and so you get these big bills at the end of the month. Whereas with Mac Stadium, it's just one. So that's one thing. The other thing that I picked up is one of these X touches. So I use this with central control into vMix. The nice thing about these is that they're motorized faders. There's so much more throw on here than what I was using before, which was a little APC Mini. And this is how we're able to control audio on our cloud instances. So I move this fader. It moves another one in Australia, in Germany. So for a show that we're doing this weekend, this is how we all have these, and we all have Stream Decks, and we're able to control these things. So those are 2 of the things that I've added recently.
Yeah, I rearranged my whole desk. I think I've shown it. I think it's on the Saturday session. You'll see me I'm not going to pull out my iPhone right now. I am working on kind of a remote shot so that I can kind of show it a little bit more effectively. But I found that I needed a screen that was right here, that was right down below me, that I can have. So when I'm doing a presentation, I want to be able to see the next slide there. I decided that's where I wanted it to be. Right now, what I show is the chat, from everyone here to there. I put a PC over here. I took one of the melees, and I have a PC over here. I'm digging into Universe, and the reason I'm digging into Universe is because now that I've used the mimoLive and I've been able to design interfaces for me to cut a show, I really want that for my ATEM, and there's nothing that does that. In case someone's watching, there's nothing that lets you design an interface that really takes full advantage of the ATEM. Although I have thought about using, I guess, Mimo controls ATEMs as well. So I could potentially have Mimo do the ATEM control from there. So I'm thinking about that, but I'm also looking at Universe as an interface designer to kind of tie back that I can open up in my iPad and make it go. So, but I needed something to design it. So I'm going to PC over there. Then I have four monitors. These are the monitors that I use for the show. I mean, they're the 4 monitors coming from my USB. From my Mac Studio. And then I was pretty proud. I did some metal work over the weekend, and I now have. Again, if you look at Saturday's show, I think I figured out a way to get my Stream Deck XL kind of turned sideways and right up against, and really, it's part of the mount now for my telestrator. So It's just much easier for me to change colors and thicknesses and everything else. It's not. It was kind of like hanging out, and I was trying to tape it, and I was like, enough of this. And I ordered a 1/8" aluminum. You can buy like just, like 18" by 12" aluminum from Amazon, and had it delivered, and then just drilled some holes in it and put it in the back plane behind that to make that work. And so anyway, so that I was excited about, like a couple other monitors here that I'm using for my other computers. So anyway, so I kind of reorganized all of that. It was kind of a mess for a while, and now it's kind of settled in, and now I have to pull all the HDMI out of it and put it all back together. I'm kind of working on the wiring diagram for that. So sometime this week, most likely, I'll pull it apart and put it back together and have it just be kind of a little bit more organized than it is right now. So anyway, that's what I've been working on. Next question.
Andre Dale in Berlin. We recently purchased a Scarhoy PTZ controller. Man, what a great device. The software reactor is like Companion on steroids, but quite complicated. Anyone fiddled with Scarhoy panels yet? And he's got a link there to him.
We have done a lot of Scarhoy panels. In fact, Scarhoy really started by building kind of open source. You can just have an Arduino and they'll, and build whatever buttons you want. So we would build custom ones. I mean, Scarhoy build ones that are there, but I think they still have some of the support for that, where you can, what we would do is have the buttons all machined. So when you're handing them to a client, you don't really want anything to look techy. So we would really make the interface for them. We'd get the buttons built and get the buttons etched so that they end with you can get them etched open with little lights on the back and everything else. And it's remarkable when you're charging, when you're building something for $80,000, spending another $1,000 on the controller is not a big deal. So anyway, so we would build these things that really look nice and really are very clear for the client to use, and has the Scarhoy innards to make that actually work. And so we've used some of those there. We've used also their color controller and some of their edit tools and their RCPs. That are there. So, definitely have used a lot of Scarhoy stuff. I do find that the blue pill, their interface to be a little bit complex again, like you said, but very, very, very powerful. Because one of the things they've done is they've extracted the controls. So you can do a lot of things that are complicated, but they know how to talk to all these switchers and all these pieces of hardware, similar to Companion. I never thought of them as being a competitor to Companion. It's just a different way of thinking. But we need to get those guys on too. So someone put that in the second hour. We'll see if we can figure that out. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, could you see the new MacBook Air M3 being a solid entry-level choice for audio and music production?
Bill?
Yes, and the reason I say but is that I thought in the original days, audio is so much smaller than video. I can get by with a really lightweight machine and it'll be fine. And that is true to a certain point. The problem that I've run into, at least in conceptual since then, is that people who get into audio suddenly find themselves I want lots of tracks and 64 drum tracks and a gazillion strings and things like that. And then I've seen a lot of posts from people whose music composition and creation has gotten so complex that it is bogging down even high-end machines. Now, you're saying solid entry-level choice. If you're planning on doing like 4 parts or something, modest, it should just blaze and be fabulous for you. But if you're really thinking about the long range, getting into things like symphony composition and things like that, you'd be surprised at how much load there is in music production at that level these days. So pick your place.
I'll come back to, if you're doing anything seriously with media, you need a pro. you just the I/O is really problematic, and not having the max chips or those types of things is really problematic. If you're doing, the Air is not designed for you. Like the Air is designed for a marketing professional or someone who just wants to, or an executive or someone who really doesn't do a lot of heavy lifting but wants something that's sleek and small and easy to use and do all those things. That's great. But if you're doing any kind of hard work, you should get a pro. Next question.
Peter Johansson in Sweden is up next. Rumors are that Apple II is working on screen foldable devices. Are there really any benefits to foldable screen anything?
Courtney?
Yeah, especially in phones, I think there's a utility. All the foldable phones that are out there now from Samsung and Google and the others that fold up into a very compact form are easy to carry in a pocket. Now, as far as laptops go, there have been things on the market. Take a look at this one here from Amazon for about $300 that lets you add two screens to your laptop, and it attaches to the back. And they're not a folding LCD screen, but it allows you to expand your workspace to three screens, and it folds up flat and can travel in a laptop case. So something like that, and that works with both Mac and PC. So that's a solution available now for a fairly cheap amount of money. Engineering a foldable laptop screen is much more difficult to do, and I would think it would reduce the lifetime of it quite a bit. So I'd be careful about that. We'll see if they do come up with anything. Most of the foldable laptop screens I've seen that they've shown in demos for different computer manufacturers are really unusable because they turn the keyboard into a screen, and then you have to use a touch keyboard then for your keyboard, which doesn't really work very well. You have to use it, to get anything done, you have to use an external Bluetooth keyboard with them and use both of the screens as a monitor rather than one as a keyboard, one as a monitor.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, so the sales of foldable phones are about 7 million a quarter at this point. So the number is not insignificant, but compared to what iPhone needs to do, it's probably not yet tipped over to the point where they're going to do it. My guess is Apple has been playing with every one of these and has 55 different versions of this in their industrial design department. And I think they've probably found out two things. First of all, they are very temperamental in terms of screens breaking, cracking. And Apple's going to want to do this when it does it at a scale where it doesn't want a huge amount of returns. I think the second thing it's found is that there's really not a good application yet. There's not a killer app. There's not other than it makes it smaller that's really going to drive this. And I think the number of people I see with iPhones sticking out their back pockets and falling out their jackets, it needs to be a lot smaller is, I don't think, driving the market yet.
It takes a long time to figure these things out. So as a result, exactly what was mentioned before is that Apple will spend a lot of time developing things that will never make it out of the lab. I've talked to folks that used to work at Apple that just said, they'll spend $100 million on something that I would love to have in my living room. Like, it's just the most amazing thing, and you think it's going to work. And then they go, well, there's not a big enough market for that. And then they let it go. And so there's a lot of things, just because they're working on a development of it or doing research on it probably means nothing. Every person that I know that got a foldable phone within 2 years, the next phone they got was not foldable. Within 3 years, the next phone they got was not foldable. And eventually that foldable phone died, and they just chose, I don't know if it was worth the trouble of doing that, and so I haven't seen anybody particularly, I haven't seen anybody buy that I know, and it's a very small sample, buy two of them in a row. So I think that's the challenge that the market has, and Apple tends not to be a truly innovative company. They tend to be, they innovate on other people's core ideas. So other people do it badly first, and then Apple looks at it and kind of drafts on them, looks at what they're doing, plays with it, and then enters the market with oftentimes a more elegant solution. And I don't think they found that elegant solution yet. Next question.
Next one comes from Kenny Campton in Greenville, Illinois, looking for ways to make controlling Dish TV network easier for an elderly family member. With multifunction buttons, some on the sides, the provided remote control is simply too complex for some to understand and operate.
Nigel?
Yes, I guess we're talking about the Dish thing, not a streaming version. Of course, the problem with the universal remote controls are so much promise, so little usability. There really are, in my experience, two solutions. One is very expensive, which is a complete home automation system, where you'll get a remote control from someone like Crestron or Savant or someone, where we could actually program the channels into the remote control, so press here for CNN type of thing. The other thing, which I don't know anyone who's really used this, but they do advertise, is you can now buy remote controls to Dish Network with voice control. Again, depending on the elderly person, that may or may not be helpful. Again, the remote control is hideous and it's got too many buttons, but there is a big button. And if you might be able to use a voice-activated device to talk to your dish network, depending which one of the 1,000 different dish network interfaces you have, voice may be an answer.
Dish runs on, you can use your code and run it on your Apple TV. The controller for the Apple TV is a lot simpler. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Discuss Android webcams, and he's got a big link there to an Ars Technica article.
Courtney?
Well, you've been able, at least in the Windows world, which is what I think they were talking about here on Windows 11, for the last Windows 10 and Windows 11, you have an application called Your Phone that comes with Windows that links to your cell phone and lets you put your cell phone up on the screen and do anything that you could do on your cell phone on your computer screen. The thing they haven't done until now is to use the camera as a webcam. And so that's the thing that they're adding to this. So it's a new implementation. I think it'll be part of that Your Phone, your Android phone link. And it has to link over Bluetooth. And once you establish your Bluetooth wireless connection to your laptop, then you can use the webcam, apparently. But I have not tried it.
Quick reminder, of course, whether it's today or other days, if you have questions, you can always use askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global 24/7. So you can put those in any time of the day, and then we'll feed them into the system. Next question.
Next question from Andre Dole in Berlin. Alex, I purchased a Brocoon laptop stand as well. The problem is it's assembled poorly, so the two big plates are a bit twisted against each other. Works fine, but looks a bit annoying.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on how you use it. For me, it's worked perfectly. so I couldn't, it's folded up quite nicely, and I use it a lot, and I've used it a lot on the road, and I use them in my office, and I found that they worked exceptionally well for the price, which is like $32 or something like that. Go ahead, Bill.
So, Andre, I was talking about the one that I use, and I actually found it online. This is the Rain Design iLevel. I will tell you, it is built like a tank. It's solid aluminum. That little switch that slides at the bottom changes the angle of the back. And I've had this thing, and I've changed the angle probably 10,000 times, and I've beat on it, and it just stays there. It's a really good piece, and you can say it's $60 US, so it's not terribly expensive. It also acts as a great heat sink. That's a solid aluminum slab behind it. So if you have an older laptop that has heat problems, that actually helps you a little bit. So that personal recommendation.
And I think that for me, mine is because I'm packing it into a case. I think it's the vertical height of it folded is probably a little less than the one that you have there. So that's probably
this is not a really travel unit. This is for your desk at home. If you want to travel,
mine has to fit into a case with a bunch of stuff on it and so on and so forth.
Agreed.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Unfortunate choice of name. It comes pre-Brocoon. So that's why they call it Brocoon.
Next question.
As a weasel without money is a Brocoon. Anyway, we're at Ashitaka in Casablanca. With the R1 being shipped with each Vision Pro, is Apple going to make it a standard GPU for the future Pro computers, leading to a spatial computing lineup that will take universal control to the next level? Interesting.
Number one is welcome to Casablanca. We haven't had. I think you're the first question from Casablanca that I can remember. Maybe you asked one previously, but we're really excited. Casablanca is one of my favorite movies. So anyway,
ask it again, Rick. Ask it again. Yes,
exactly. Play it again, Sam. Sometime I'll get to visit. I think that the R1 is built very specifically for the Vision. I'll be surprised if we see it anywhere else. I think that Apple designed a chip that is that is specifically designed to deliver real-time I/O from the cameras to the display. And I think that's what it's really designed to do. And I think it's a pretty mission-specific solution. We may see it somewhere else. I could be wrong, but I think that what they built it for so far right now is just to handle that one problem, which is a very big problem. Courtney?
Yeah, I think you're right, Alex. It's designed for handling uncompressed HD video from multiple cameras and melding them into a single bitmap. And I think utility for that, anything other than something like the Vision Pro, is probably negligible unless they can repurpose those processors for something else on the laptop.
Next question.
John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania is up next. My configuration of the Fenwick sound desk and loopback configuration sometimes seems to get messed up and stops working. Can't find any reason for the behavior. Anyone else having troubles with that? It's a good workflow.
I think it's a good workflow. We definitely have had folks that have had, Chris doesn't have any problem with it. It works 100% of the time for Chris. But I think that every other person I know that's gone down our workflow has had some issue. And what this usually means is that Chris is working in a certain way that happens to be congruent with the way the software works. It's very easy for someone to have some other way that they're doing it that is exposing some instability in the software that Chris just doesn't happen to do. There's a lot of things that oftentimes production people will get into is that they just kind of do things in a very specific way and they do it over and over and over again. And I think that I think that might be the case. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, for the longest time, my primary daily driver was my iMac Pro, and Preto has the exact same machine, and I would do things routinely. He's like, I can't make that work. It's like, how is that possible? It's like you and I and these things, I mean, it's weird how I always tell people everything affects everything with a computer. Everything can affect anything, and you have a different print driver or a different. Your Helvetica came from a different type foundry. Who knows what it is? I will say that in my configuration, the one thing that I always have problems with, and Mickey tells me that this is a Sonoma sound devices thing. Every morning, I have to not just power down, but unplug my Mix Pre and plug it back in. It's a weird thing. Every morning, I have to do that to get it to pass and receive audio.
I don't have to do it every day, but I have to do it at least 3 or 4 times a week. So I will.
It might be the same.
It's not every day, but I will notice that in the morning.
I've gotten to the point I just do it. I don't even oh, gee, is it going to work today?
I really should. I really should do it every time because it is something that it is, with all of us, we have, every once in a while, my ATEM goes gray. Every once in a while, my Sony turns off. My camera just turns off and it's not there anymore. And every once in a while, my Mix Pre can't connect. I will say all of these things are fixed. If I get up in the morning, and I've started to do this, if I get up in the morning, just turn each one on and off. so like if I just, as I'm getting up, if I just do that one thing, it works 100% of the time. It's just that there's something about us leaving these on for a long period of time that they get into their own state.
That's another thing.
I will say that just resetting them seems to, they just, we're using all of these products in ways that they weren't designed. So that's part of the challenge.
Another thing is that I power everything down every night. The only thing I don't unplug or turn off is, I have a digital clock over here. I leave that one on. But I turn everything off every night.
I power a lot of things down. I have to admit, I don't power everything down. I will say that I have obviously we've talked about it in the past. I have a shortcut that turns off all my lights and most of my other stuff. I haven't gotten to the habit of turning my computers off, mostly because I don't want to log back into them. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Mark K. in New York. Are there any good prior episodes of Office Hours on how to best start a YouTube chat show, how to grow an audience, as well as what hardware and software to use?
I think that we're doing them in lots of different ways. And so I think that those chats, but I think that'd be a great subject. It's probably a good Friday subject for us to talk about, or Monday subject for us to talk about, is how to create a chat show. And just generally, what are the functionality of a chat show? I think would be an interesting subject. So we'll throw that into the second hour suggestions in Discord, and we'll keep just so it reminds us, and we'll work on that. But I think it's a great idea. I don't think we've done one. We've done lots of ones on how to build shows and how to do stuff, but I think that roundtables are like what we're doing here. We do a very complicated version of this, but there are ways to do it in a relatively simple way, and I think it'd be fun to talk about. Next question.
Next one comes from John Foltz in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. The other day, Guy mentioned Apple's remote desktop to control a computer on Mac Stadium, but I found a downside to that. Apple's remote desktop doesn't pass audio. The video is snappy, but no audio. Bummer.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm mostly using Splashtop for business, and that's the one that there is a setting for you to have audio pass through on your side. It is a setting that you have to go in and change. I reached out to Oliver during this the time that you asked the question and the time that I'm now talking, and he says that audio will pass an Apple remote desktop, but there's some things that happen on the computer where it'll take some inputs and outputs and redirect them. So it's possible. You just got to change some settings. The other one that I'd recommend is Parsec. It also passes audio. So both the two major ones will work for sure as far as fluid, high color. And that's the thing with Splashtop for Business. To get 444 color, you have to upgrade. And on the Parsec side, you have to get Warp, which Warp requires 10 users and it's super expensive. So just depending on what you're doing and how much you're banging on this thing, like if Chris Fenwick ever steps up and starts doing Final Cut in the cloud, I think he's going to probably want one of these solutions that gives him the full meal deal for color correction. And come on, Chris, come to the dark side. We edit in the cloud in the future.
Go ahead, Chris.
I choose to ignore that comment and say, I'm gonna ignore it so bad, Guy. I wanted to say to John, considering your last question, that's how much I'm ignoring you, Guy. Feel free to reach out to me on Discord if you want to chat about your audio setup. And Guy, one day, not today.
Go ahead. Next question.
Cindy Drozden, Erie, Colorado. My 90-year-old friend can't handle learning a smartphone or a flip phone. What I'd like to get her is a device that has 3 large buttons only. They are programmed to call 2 family members and 911. Does this exist?
Nigel?
I'm not sure it does. There are a number of cell phones for the hard of seeing and for the elderly. I found some called the Jitterbug, and there's the Blind Shell, bad name, Classic 2, and they do simplify, but mostly what they are Android phones with UIs on top of them that restricts the amount of buttons they have. The days of the very big phone we used to have with very big buttons so you could dial are hard to do, but what I would do is I would start with who is their network carrier, because it will be different by network carrier, and then go back and ask them what they think the solution are. They may say they can't find one, and then look on Amazon for Jitterbug. That might be the simplest solution.
Courtney?
Yeah, a couple of suggestions. There's a company called Raz Mobility, and you can take a look at their Raz phone here. It's designed for dementia patients, and it has this, as Nigel was alluding to, this user interface that is a picture of the up to 6 people and 911 emergency call here that you can that is set up. It also is set up for remote management, so that you can set it up and you can reach that phone and remotely manage it, put up wireless messages for caregivers. So it's designed around just what you need. It does video calls and or regular phone calls. But another suggestion I might make is set them up with a personal audio assistant like Amazon Alexa or the Google Home, because both of those can make phone calls just by saying call so-and-so with a voice call. And that can come in very handy if you're fallen and you can't get up and you can't get to your mobile phone. It can save your life in an emergency. So take that into consideration. It's the easiest to operate as long as they have the ability to speak and call out a name or say call so-and-so. You can use those wireless assistants, those home assistants, to make those calls.
Chris?
Courtney, that software looks great. Cindy, I also want to remind you that at least in the iPhone world, and that's what I was going to recommend, there's got to be a good app, and that I had not found that one, Courtney. But in the iPhone world, there's a couple of settings that I might recommend that you do. One, and I did this with my mother. You can program the phone to automatically answer when anybody calls. You can also program the phone to default to speakerphone, because my mom would she'd get a call, it's happened for so long, and she'd sit there and talk like this, but she couldn't hear me because the phone was just doing the little speaker and not the speakerphone mode. So that was a nightmare. But you can program it to default to speakerphone mode, and you can tell it to only answer calls, thinking about fraud stuff, only answer calls from people in your favorites. So you just put the family members that want to talk to this friend of yours or family or friends. And that actually worked really well with my mom. We recently kind of had to take her phone away from her. But I will also say, even though we told it to only answer from the favorites, there was a couple of times when I was living with my mom and caring for her where calls would still get through somehow. Unbelievable.
Yeah. There you go, Bill.
And just another alternative, I'm sure there are Android things that are the same, but on my watch, my iWatch or Apple Watch, it has built-in fall detection. It also has a process for making simple calls and things like that if you get the cellular service with it. And I would think that they probably have simple interfaces and simple front pages where you can call for emergency and things like that. My mom loved her watch and didn't give it up until she reached 100 years old. And so it was nice having both this combination of if she falls, that's automated 911 and a call to me. And I could get a call to her on her wrist. I would have been able to get a call to her on her wrist and back to me should that have been necessary and had she lived. I mean, she passed away 10 years ago at that late advanced age. So there are more possibilities. And I would imagine there's some Android watch that does the same kind of thing. This has been great for that.
Next question.
Ronnie Hofsoy in Tromsø, Norway. I need longer Insta360 link USB cables. What minimum specification would I need to be looking for?
So the question is, how long do you need them to go? I will tell you that as an Insta360 user, I can't get it to go more than 10 feet effectively. So I just can't find 15-foot cables or any longer that will. And what it'll do is, and I bought a lot of them. so I keep on thinking I'm going to send them back, but now I have this huge stack of USB cables that I use for other things, but not for the Insta360. There's some kind of power solution that it needs that it just doesn't seem to work out. So the ones that I have made work are these 10-foot cables. Now I get the right angle is important to me because otherwise it sticks out and kind of forms a lever on the camera. So having a right angle is a little bit nicer, especially if you have two. One of the things I do with the camera, with the Insta360s for people talking to each other is I'll have a person here and a person here, and I'll put the Insta360s right there, one here and one here, looking this way and this way. So these folks get to look right at each other, and the Insta360s are almost between them. And they're so nice because they're so small. And what I do is I mount them right on top of each other. And so as a result, having them stick out too much would be problematic. And so I use those right angles to make that work. Other things that are important for you to look at are this 20 gigabit per second, but most importantly, the USB 3.2 Gen 2 you need to have to make these work effectively. And so 240 watt cable is nice to have in there. But what I will say is that I just haven't been successful at getting them to work consistently. I've had them work a little bit and then not work. There's been a lot of problems with them. I do think that one thing that I've thought about for running them longer is potentially getting a hub. So having a hub near the camera, so have the last 10 feet go into the camera and then hub it out, and then deliver it out. That way the hub is delivering. It appears to be a power problem, not a data problem. So I have thought about doing that. I just haven't gone that far yet. But that's my thought process right now. Now go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you touched on what I was going to suggest is use a powered hub, but be aware that if you put a long cable on that from the hub to your laptop, it may not charge your laptop if you're using it, for the power pass through to your laptop for charging. It may not be able to deliver enough current to charge your laptop at the same time as using it as a power.
Yeah, my thing is mostly I could run a 10-foot cable or 15-foot cable to the hub from the laptop, not trying to get power from it, and then another 10 feet from the hub or 5 feet or whatever I want to the camera, and potentially get 25, 30 feet there. But this is one of the limitations of using webcams for things that they weren't designed for. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. ABBA's Voyage has shown that virtual concerts can succeed with audiences. Do you think Gen AI can help bring variation to virtual shows?
Nigel?
Having seen ABBA Voyage, I would tell you one of the things that's great about it is that there's a live band. And so the live band is playing along to a voice and a video track that existed before. And the live band brings a certain energy. The other thing I'll tell you is that it's a very, very complicated show in terms of light, in terms of video, in terms of the room and the way that they use lights and things within the room to balance with the virtual screens. So I'm sure AI could, but my guess is they've got it right, with the exception of one section I don't like very much. I wouldn't really change it. When I go and see a band, I always check set list, and with the exception of Elvis Costello, most of them play the same thing the same night, every night, in the same order, because it works.
Bill?
And I was just saying, it's not live concert, but Miss Swift's Eras Tour movie is currently sitting in worldwide box office, according to Box Office Mojo, at $261 million. So a market for live feeling music by mainstream stars at the top of the heap is kind of unlimited. I mean, that's a pretty stunning return off of a music presentation done in theaters. That's the worldwide box office, $261 million.
Oh, this is just for her movie.
Yeah, just for the Eras Tour movie. Multiple plays. It's not a single concert, single night, but creating a capture of her live concert, presenting it to a global audience. It was $180 million just in the U.S., another $80 million worldwide. That's some serious money.
Yeah, I don't think you need to make the concerts less expensive, to produce. I mean, I think that you can to do a lot of them or whatever, but I think that it's really about seats. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the number of seats that you can fill. And so if you look at, like, for instance, Cinemark, I think has 1.4 million. I think Amazon is, or not Amazon, but AMC is at probably 3.2 million, somewhere in that range of seats. And so, and what's cool is that they have a lot of theaters. And so theoretically they could be, so they're using these as for filming right now, like the Eras or with Beyonce. They did pretty well with it, but you could theoretically activate all those seats with enough internet. So a million seats could, a million seats at $35 would make twice as much as the as a single event. Eras, I think the average revenue per theater for Eras is like $17.5 million per night. I think that's the per night. It's about an average of $248 per seat. They've sold 4.3 million more now. I think it's probably closer to 4.5 million seats at that range. But imagine being able to do that all in one night, or do a million seats all in one night for less money, because it would take less to set up, and you could do it every night. And what's interesting is that you could do that a couple times and then go on tour. And you know how many people who went to the movie wouldn't go see it in the theater? None. Like, none would say, "Oh, I saw it in the theater, so now I don't want to see it in the stadium." They would all go, so anybody who can afford it. And so there's a and the reason I bring this up is that there's going to be, theatrical is in big trouble. Like, they are in horrible trouble, and they are looking for solutions. And just watch what happens next, because it does not make sense. Like, I saw Napoleon over the weekend, and I'll never get that 2.5 hours back again. Like, it was, I would have been, if I had spent $150 on that, like, here's the thing. I just want to say, for people who do what we do, the production value was Apple level. Like, it was, the effects were great. The cinematography was amazing. The acting was exemplar. Like, all of those things are great. It just didn't have a story. And it was, so it was the writing that was problematic. So anyway, that's so the thing is that it makes way more sense to wait for that and watch it at home for most of these movies than go to see them. And I think that's going to be the big challenge. Yeah. Thank you all. Thanks to the incredible group. Just kept those questions rolling in. Now, if we send back your questions right now, if you put them in the QR code, which of course you can put in askofficehours.global, you can do that 24/7. You can put those in, and we feed them into that. And if we didn't get to yours today, that goes back and just gets automatically pulled back in. The one thing I will say is you got to ask one question at a time on the QR code. If you give us a list of questions of any kind, we tend to just reject it. So if you're posting the same thing over and over again, and you know who you are, we're not going to put it in until you put one question at a time. But if you get it sent back to you, it's going back to your notes. We just always want to let people know that these questions go back to your notes. They don't get just sent into the ether, and you can bring them back in anytime you want. So definitely bring them back in the next day, and we're happy to talk about them then. So thanks to the incredible work by our producers asking all those great questions. Thanks to the panel. A great panel today. I love hanging out with everybody here. And we can't do this without you, and we really appreciate it. If you're interested in being a panelist, we have a panelist meeting. We had the new panelist meeting last Saturday. Next Saturday we have another one coming up. So thank you to the panelists for being here, and thanks to the incredible team that codes this show, that runs this show, that manages this show. There's a huge village that is required to make this all happen, and they come in 7 days a week and make it happen. So we really appreciate everybody's contribution. We traveled 84,000 miles today, 135,000 kilometers, and that is 665 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. Dark guy was like, I'm leaving, but only with my
Shut the lights off.
Expecting
somebody with a broom.
I looked over and the guy's gone dark. He's gone dark.
It's
like, I'm shutting off
after dark.
I'm shutting off these lights I'm shutting off the lights at 9 o'clock, no matter what. That's what the production team needs.
Wrap it up.
The
lights are off.
The production team needs a DMX control of all of our lights all over the world, so they can just hit the button, and we might talk for a couple more minutes, but in darkness.
Guy learned this behavior by turning off AWS instances.
That's right. I want to go into another time increment for billing.
Don't want to pay for another hour.
Exactly. Thanks, everybody. See you.
See ya.